entertainment, current events, and Hollywood. Don't miss Creator to Creators, hosted by the filmmaker Meosha, known for the Shudder hit documentary Horror Noir and the acclaimed film Anatomy of an Anti-Hero, Redemption. This show features interviews with filmmakers and creatives from around the globe. Join the fun with guest celebrities and gain valuable insights. Subscribe now and follow Creator to Creators.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Creators to Creators today. Today we have a special guest.
And my name is Therese Casadesus Rawson.
Beautiful. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, thank you. This is fun. I like that.
Absolutely. So I really love going back to the beginning. I always say the beginning charts our trajectory in life, our little habits that we pick up along the way, kind of follow us into our adulthood. So tell me a little bit about your childhood. What was that like? And, how did you find your way into doing the things that you're doing now?
It's an interesting thing. Maybe some of the things that I'm not doing now would be more relevant because my parents were professional pianists and they had started touring in the US in the mid-30s. Wow. And they happened to come, they came every year and they went all over the country, but very much on the East Coast, around New York and so forth. And they had a lot of piano students as well. And in the summer in France, they were involved with a summer program that still exists today, which is called the Fontainebleau Schools. Like the big Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami in Florida.
Yeah.
So Fontainebleau Schools. And you can actually look it up. And you will see that it is a program for musicians and also for fine arts. Anyway, they would come back after their tour and teach there. And in the spring of 1940, after they were finished with their tour, and thank goodness they brought my much older brothers with them. I wasn't born yet. The French cultural minister said, you cannot go back and do the program this summer because we have to use the premises to train the army. And you can well believe that in April 40, things were very, very unstable all over Europe. And especially, it was 2 months before France was occupied. So parents said, they said, well, why don't you try to run the program in the States? Because you already have a lot of American students. And the program was actually for American students in France and had been founded in 1921. And it was the idea of General Pershing, end of World War I, getting into World War II. So my parents then stayed and ran the program in Newport, Rhode Island for 2 years, and then in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, near the famous Tanglewood Festival. And they stayed from January 40, I should say, until the July of 1946.
Wow.
So it was a real exile, as you can well imagine. And I was born during those years and born in Princeton, New Jersey.
Amazing, amazing.
So, of course, I was surrounded by music every living moment because both my parents played, of course, and performed and practiced, but also my older brother, who was already 15 years older than I when I was born, was preparing to become a pianist himself.
Wow.
And the family got very famous as the first family of the piano in the 50s and the 60s because they played 3-piano repertoire. And this was the idea of the conductor of the New York Philharmonic at the time, Dimitri Mitropoulos.
Wow.
And he said, to my parents, they had performed together already. Oh, but you have a young son who's coming up and he's very talented. I heard him at the Young Artists awards that they had just won that. And I think you should try to play 3 pianos. There's a little bit of repertoire, Bach and Mozart, and I think this would be fascinating. And indeed it was. And they made a video, which you can still find today in these old video places like VAI. And it's called The First Family of the Piano. And
Wow.
it's 3 pianos. But other than that, it was mostly my parents together and my father alone who probably got the biggest fame in the US, starting actually in the 40s.
Mm, that's
Yeah.
amazing. That's amazing to just like kind of be, did you know that your parents were, I guess, I guess,
Famous?
oh yeah, famous, a lack of a better term. Yeah.
A question that people ask me, and it's interesting. I would say that it's mostly people that were friends and so forth that would say, "Oh, you must be so proud of your parents," and to see them on stage, of course, struck me as not what every kid's parents were doing, but
Sure.
it didn't surprise me that much. I mean, it was part of our lives, and yeah, I was fortunate in the fact that my mother, and she says that a lot in the book. By the way, just a short interruption. The book is called My Musical Notes, and it is by Gaby Casadesus, and that's the family name. My father was Robert Casadesus, and it's kind of hard to pronounce for most people. And I always say, well, the name was originally actually Catalan from Catalonia, but the pronunciation sort of rhymes with Kalamazoo, Casadesus. A
Yeah.
lot of people pronounce it wrong, but that's what it was. And so this book is now available, on Amazon. It's kind of easy to find. But in the book, she mentions a lot, the challenges of being a mother, raising 3 children, having a performing career, traveling, and
Yeah.
she performed herself as a soloist. And so for us, I would say to grow up with, she was very attentive to having a close family life.
That's beautiful.
And when you look at the some of the pictures in these magazines called Musical America, these were published from the 1900s on to tell you all about famous musicians, musical opportunities, this and that and the other. And there's pictures of my parents were seen as kind of an iconic couple
I love
with elegant French lady who could cook, who could raise children, who was elegant, and at the same time was a performer and helped with her husband's career. And
Yeah.
so it's really funny to look back at these issues, which you can find, for instance, online and also in the Library of Congress and so forth. And you see these pictures, they love that in the 40s, and they show my mother, for instance, having my father taste like from a spoon, a little dish that she was preparing. They also show a picture of my father pitching a ball to my a brother, the pianist, who was holding a baseball bat. And this is what was so exciting for people then.
Yeah.
And it came the age of TV. And that's when these things with 3 pianos. My mother participated in a concert where they had 25 pianists on stage playing the same piece by Chopin at the same time.
Wow.
This was, I guess, the golden age of TV, I suppose. I
Yeah.
mean, people would
That's
almost think it was
incredible.
crazy today to do something like that.
That's
But that's what it
incredible.
was. It was fun.
I'm sure it was like, you know, um, it's very interesting because like I can't imagine like I look at famous kids today, like kids like oh gosh, I don't want to butcher their name, but like let's say a Beyonce and her child, like she's so
Okay.
famous musically and
Yeah.
she has kids that she raised. So I just imagine what the kids feel like. I know it's like, oh, this is my mom, but
Yeah.
my mom, it's like,
I would almost think in a certain way that it's almost the word isn't maybe right, but almost worse today
yeah,
because instant communication. Everybody sees everything all the time.
yes,
I would say yes, among say other musicians and so forth. Yes, well, I was surrounded by fascinating people and so forth, but it wasn't mentioned to me, like every day. You
yeah,
know, parents are so famous. I mean, in a way, I mean, yes, performing artists were famous, but not, I guess, the same as movies. I think actors' children, that's a very tough, I think, a tough act. And I think many of them, unfortunately, seem to have had unhappy childhoods. And some of them were neglected as well. And that was not the case at all in our family. And I used to teach opera singers and vocal recitalists how to sing in French.
Wow.
And so that was kind of my specialty in music, because I decided, and you were talking about childhood, when I was about 13 years old, my mother said, well, we all practice the piano starting age 4 or 5.
Right.
But, I enjoyed it, but it didn't seem very central to my life. And when I was about 12, 13, my mother said, look, if you're going to want to do something with piano, you got to, really decide if that's what you want to do, because you're going to have to practice a lot more than 1 hour a day. And so I said, yeah, I'm really sure. And she said, well, nobody's forcing you to be a pianist at all. If you have something else, you say, I really like school. I like my schoolwork. I was more like an academic type.
Nice.
But the funny thing is that I said, and my mother said, well, you don't even have to be a performer. You could teach piano. And I said, no. And I said to myself, that's the one thing I don't want to do. Teach the piano.
But it's amazing. I think it's absolutely incredible that, that you went down that path. I have a really interesting a fun question for you. About your mom, the training that she had, and I think it's the Paris Conservatory.
That's right. Yep.
That
both my parents met there.
That's
amazing. It's an amazing thing, because you could say they met in the classroom. Yeah. And because one of the teachers said to my father, he was rehearsing a concerto. And when you are an instrumentalist, there's the orchestra and then there's the soloist. And the orchestra part was very often played by a second piano. It's known as a piano reduction. It's kind of a niche term. But what it means is that the second piano could perform the part that the orchestra would be performing. And so what you do in the classroom to rehearse, to practice. Awesome. And one of my father's teachers said, oh, Gabi, she's good. She's one of my best students. Why don't you have her, play the orchestra part while you're playing? And that's kind of how they met.
That's amazing. So it's interesting, because I wonder if that influenced her musical style and approach to piano playing, just that in itself.
Well, I would say the atmosphere at the Paris Conservatory in those days, let's face it, the composer Gabriel Fauré was the director, Debussy was on the jury, and then a little bit later, because he was not involved that much with the Conservatoire, was my parents' relationship with Ravel.
Okay.
Maurice Ravel. And that came early on, when my father just gave a recital debut in Paris in his very early 20s, and he played all Ravel, which was very unusual in those days, because people did not play a whole recital of just one composer.
Got it. Okay.
People like concerts with, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Even to have one instrument for a whole concert was considered to be a little tough for the audience to put up with. They used to mix it up like a smorgasbord,
Amazing.
Bit of piano and voice, a little bit of piano and violin and so on. So here's my father, kind of being cutting edge and doing a whole recital of Ravel, and Ravel was in the audience. And he said, oh my goodness, you must be a composer, because you understand my music so well. And my father, indeed, and that's not well known, was also a composer. And he composed more than 60 works, symphonies, concerti, chamber music, all sorts of things for different instruments. And so he basically got to be quite close to Ravel. And Ravel said to him, you're such a good performer. Maybe you can help me when I do these piano rolls. That was the ancestor of the recording.
Amazing.
And you had 78s, then you had 33s, then you had CDs, and now, streaming. But piano rolls were a strange kind of a contraption. They were like metal cylinders with little points that represented the notes and made the music. And it went through some kind of a thing that looks, I don't know, kind of like an organ grinding thing or whatever. And but it actually gave pretty good performances, not as good as a real recording that came about 10, 15 years later. And Ravel took my father to London, and they did these recordings, and he said to my father, now you play the hard pieces. The only problem was that they did not recognize the performers, and so nobody knew which pieces were played by Ravel and which were played by my father.
Oh, wow.
It's on that occasion, which my mother relates in her book. It's a great chapter. It's actually right at the beginning, that they all went to a dinner party after all that, after these recordings, and it was hosted by an opera singer, and she had invited an 18-year-old violinist from Hungary to play, to entertain the guests. And she apparently, she was also a classical violinist, and she played a wonderful piece by Ravel. She had a boyfriend who was a cellist, and it's a duo for violin and cello. And then she just launched off at Ravel and her hostess request in some Hungarian folk song music.
Wow.
And she was apparently, my mother relates, wrapped in a shawl, and she looked very dramatic. And she played this like for 2 or 3 hours. And Ravel was mesmerized. And when he went home to the hotel with my parents, he said, I'm going to set to work immediately. This young woman inspired me. And he wrote probably one of his most famous pieces, which is for violin, which is called Sigan. And this year is the 100th anniversary. No, last year, 24 was the 100th anniversary of that composition.
Amazing.
So they were very close as friends to Ravel. And Ravel became also director of the Fontainebleau schools for 1 year. And then unfortunately he fell ill and he died in 1937. So, yeah. So my parents were surrounded by this, what you could call maybe the 20th century golden age of piano music. Because it was, we have a visitor, a cat. Oh, we have two. And
I love it.
Yep. And this one, since I moved from the other room because something was banging on the floor, she's settling down here. She may come to, you may see her on the screen. I don't know.
Perfect. We love them. We welcome cats.
They are funny.
Yes.
They have such personalities.
Absolutely, they do have such personalities.
We have a brother and sister, and here they are in their little boxes now.
Aww.
They're watching the birds.
I love it. So cute.
So,
I love
that's not part of the book, but
right. So, I'm curious about that. Like, I'm sure at some point, and did you feel the weight, or did you feel like you had like a responsibility to uphold of your parents' legacy?
Well, this came much, much later, actually.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I would say that I was a little frustrated maybe because I knew that I wasn't going to be a performer.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not a decision that I regretted. I just felt that I wasn't cut out for it. It just wasn't my thing, you might say today. But later on, I felt, well, I guess I should have done things that would have made me more famous or something like that. But then later, this legacy thing came about because people started telling me, my father died already in 1972. That was quite a long time ago. That's, and my mother was a big, big proponent of my father's legacy because he, as a composer, had not performed his own music very much, never pushed it. He was almost overly modest with it. And so she made it her task to continue this legacy of having she founded a piano competition in Cleveland, which lasted 20 years from 1975 to 1993. And this was one of these big piano competitions, almost, like kind of like the Van Cliburn and things like that. And so as a result, she maintained the legacy. And she lived a very long life. She lived till she was 98.
Wow.
And so, it's actually really pretty much after she passed. I mean, I helped out with some of these legacy projects, but she was pretty much in the driver's seat, you might say. And then after that, then, the family and, we all said, oh, we must keep this going. And so I have. And I became involved with this famous Fontainebleau schools I keep talking about. And there is a support group in the US, which is called the Fontainebleau Associations. And I became I was elected president of that. I ran it for 25 years and I helped with, everything, programming, fundraising, those kind of things, but not as a performer. And, so basically, I continued in that area, the legacy.
Yeah.
And also trying to encourage young performers to play my father's music. And so the Fontainebleau and my father's music kind of fit nicely together. So that was a good thing. And then recently, I have 2 sons, and they're grown and now. And they are very interested in the legacy. And my second son just redid the robertcasadesus.com website. And,
Nice.
And I have some of these Fontainebleau students who are making recordings. And so, it's all kind of paid off, this legacy. And I'm, in the sense that it's happening. I mean, we're not doing a piano competition, but we're trying to get some people to perform. We just established a prize with the Paris Conservatory in memory of my parents.
Beautiful.
And so now we award the prize to a young pianist of the, sort of the graduate student level, you might say, because my father, and we have them play a piece by my father, and my father's music is not easy. Anyway, we need a high-level pianist.
That's beautiful.
So yeah, so this is pretty much how this legacy thing came about. And then the idea of the translation was actually because I wanted my granddaughters to be able to read the book. Now, I'm who's now moved to Paris and is completely bilingual, but my older one is not, and she speaks good French, but I think to be able to read in English will just be easier. And then we revised the edition too. We put new pictures, we put different things.
Nice.
It's a little more relatable than the original. Yeah.
Right. For people that like the younger generation to just like understand, like grasp the
that was another thing that encouraged me.
Yeah.
Is a young musicologist who was very interested in my mother, and we've been working together for 4 or 5 years. And she is very interested in women's studies, and she wants to bring out women who have been maybe in the shadow of their husband or brother or father. And so she started writing about my mother, and she very much said, oh, yes, you must have this book translated because, it will be very interesting to my generation. Now, she's about 30. So she's about your age. I don't know exactly how old you are, but she's in her maybe just about 30, 29, 30. And she said, my generation is very interested in that. And the other thing is that and that's for the lay person, the person who's not necessarily a musician, is all the stories about travel, how people traveled in those days.
Yes.
And the way my parents, for instance, toured Russia 3 times, and toured, much later they toured Japan, but they went, and I wouldn't say all over the world, but many, many countries. And people travel by train and not that much by plane yet. I mean, they started traveling by plane in the 60s, but late 50s, but not that much. And then these wonderful trips by ship to cross the
love that.
Because my parents came every year and went back every year. And there are these great French lines and, like these great ships like the Queen Elizabeth, they still have to doing cruises and so forth. And that's something I remember as a child. And I thought that was fabulous.
So you're well traveled. I love that. I love traveling.
That was one really neat thing. And then the other thing was, as I say, to meet so many fascinating people, although I didn't always realize how important they were. Like, for instance, my parents invited Igor Stravinsky for lunch.
Wow.
And I was home, from school for lunch, and then went back to school after the lunch or whatever. And but I had a little book. I like to collect, signature. So I used to have these people sign book, and they were also. I appreciate that many of them, would engage me in conversation. They were not ignoring me. And I remember that from, say, age 10 and up.
Wait, you said that you were next door neighbors to
Einstein.
Einstein.
Yes.
Amazing.
That's amazing. He came to Princeton in the early to mid 30s. And he was teaching, of course, at the Institute of Advanced Studies, and also had to escape Germany.
Wow.
And so he lived down the street from where I was born, the little Edgehill Street and so forth. And then my parents kept up the relationship because he played the violin, which a lot of people don't realize. And he was quite a good amateur. And when he knew my mother had moved practically next door, he said, well, why don't we get together and do a little chamber music together? And so my mother went over and they played some sonatas. And then some people in the town of Princeton heard of this, and they were looking to do a big benefit concert to help, poor French children, during the occupation. They sent packages and food, things like that, and money and whatever. They tried to help. Yeah. And so the big benefit concert. And they said, wouldn't it be wonderful to have Einstein and Gaby perform? And so they asked them. They said yes.
I love that.
Played a Mozart sonata, and of course it was a huge hit.
Amazing.
There's a picture in the book of them on stage doing this, which is
amazing.
Really amazing. But he was a very simple man. And I have even a childhood memory. Maybe I was about 5. It was a little later. And we had gone over to his house. He lived with his, I think it was his stepsister or sister-in-law, somebody related to him, and another lady. So there were 2 ladies keeping house for him. And they did a nice little tea. And my mother brought me along. And she told me that. I don't actually quite remember a little bit. But that he was apparently wearing moccasins with fur. I apparently sat on the floor and started petting the moccasin fur like you would pet a cat. And my mother was, kind of scowling at me from across the room, saying, "Yeah, don't do that. This is crazy." Saying that. And he said, "Well, don't worry, Gaby. I love children." Now, he never had children of his own, but
isn't that interesting? Very
interesting. It is interesting, really. Yeah.
Wow, amazing.
Era where there's so many fascinating people around Princeton University.
I bet. I'm sure.
So, yeah, and it was close to New York, which is another reason my parents had moved there. And also because they wanted my brothers to go to an American school and to the French lycée, where they would not have learned English or very little. Yeah.
Wow. Can you say Meosha's show, Welcome to Creators in French?
Oh.
With Meosha?
Yeah, I could say that. Oui, bienvenue. L'émission avec Meosha, bien, qui est une jeune femme tout à fait charmante et qui a un don de communication. See, I'm telling you, you have a gift for communication.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. I love it.
Very love French.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I have a fun question, and I love asking every guest this question. There's no wrong answer, but the 3 levels of influence: money, power, and respect. And if you could choose only one of those things, which one would you choose and why?
Oh, no. In what sense exactly do you mean that?
Well, like if you could have, like, say, if
me have influence on other people.
Sure.
Oh, or is it what played out in my life?
Yeah, like if you could have influence on other people, if it could be just money.
Oh, yeah.
Power, or would you choose respect?
Oh, I would definitely choose respect, but that's because I'm an old lady. I might not have said that when I was, I don't know, 35. I don't
I love it. I love it. It's a great answer. It's a great answer.
So who are the
Well,
guests you usually have? Do you have just a variety?
I have a variety. Yeah, I literally just had the composer, a composer from Spain. He won a Goya award for
Wow.
like one with basically like the equivalent of an Oscar. Uh,
Oh, wow.
so he's composed many films
So you
and
go, as long as the person is a creator, right?
yes,
I mean,
yes,
it could be dance, it could be
anything. Yeah.
writing, it could be, oh, that's great. And do you have something that drives you towards certain people more than others, or?
I just honestly just like this. I love learning different things. I love like just connecting. And I think that what we get to do and what I get to do, which I'm very grateful for, is to be able to connect with people
Yeah.
like yourself and hear stories and it inspires me in my journey of life as well to like go out
Right.
and just do
Very interesting.
something.
I have to say that all the interviews I've done, they all have different kinds of a little bit, sometimes a little different angle or
Yeah.
something. But yeah, I mean, great communicators, and I think this is a lot of fun. I mean, I
Yeah.
enjoyed it all. But
Me too.
our publicist said, "Oh yeah, do you want to do interviews and whatever?" And I said, "Oh yeah, sure." I mean, I thought they had to be more scripted, so I'm glad that they're not,
Me
because
too.
I prefer the ones that are not too scripted.
Same. And I feel like people connect with people when it's real and authentic, versus I feel like I mean, I could do scripted, but I don't because I really like the raw true
Then
story.
it becomes a little too much like a school lesson,
Yeah. Yes,
a school lesson on Zoom.
absolutely. Oh,
Okay.
also, where can people find you on social media and to where they can buy this book?
Okay, well, frankly, they can't find me much on social media, but they can find me through the book, and I guess that's the best way. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
So
I
like
don't.
Amazon and those kind of
Yeah,
places.
it's published by Amazon. No, it's not published by Amazon. It's published by Bloomsbury.
Okay.
But I mean, they're Bloomsbury and Amazon. I mean, Amazon carries a lot of Bloomsbury books, and so yeah. And I guess the best thing to also say is that they can listen to some
All right.
performances of my parents, and that we have a great deal of on Apple Music, on Spotify. Just look for Robert and Gaby Casadesus, because they were very well known as duo pianists. And
Nice.
in two different ways, duo pianists can be playing four hands,
Right.
which mean one keyboard and then, a bass part and a treble part. And then
Yes.
it can also be played two piano repertoire often with an orchestra.
Yeah.
But the orchestra cannot do the four hand thing. That's a very intimate genre of music.
Yeah.
And but there were performances galore. And then Sony Classical put out a box set in 2019 that has about 62 or 3
Wow.
different CDs. I mean, the output was enormous. I mean, my father recorded, with Columbia and all that, and all the heyday of, recording music.
Wow.
And there's performances with, there's a great deal of material of recordings
Yeah.
on Spotify, on Apple Music, on YouTube even, though I find that usually the less maybe well-known ones tend to be on maybe Spotify and Apple Music. I mean, in other words, there's a lot broader selection on those two particular sites. Whereas YouTube has, snippets.
Right.
It's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that. But anyway, yeah, and you will hear four-hand piano, you will find two piano, you will even probably find three piano. And as I said, for those who are record collectors, there is a box set by Sony Classical, which was put out in 2019. So you can also go to a archive music, for instance, website that still sells CDs and so forth. So yeah, it's quite available still today, very much so.
Awesome. I have one last question, and I really would just love your your perspective on this. And I think everyone who listens to the show really loves this question. Um, what advice would you give to up and coming pianists out there?
Well, I would give the same advice to all of my music students, my singers as well, is that, imagine that you are standing in front of 20 doors and you're saying to yourself, yeah, maybe I'll try door 1 and 5 and 15. Why? Oh, well, because, this is a well-known group, or it's a well-known promoter, or well-known, manager, so forth. And I say, don't neglect the other doors. You might wind up, just playing for a little place, maybe even a little church concert or something like that. But guess what? You will meet a sponsor. You will meet somebody who's going to make your career. So if there's 20 doors, knock on all 20 and don't ignore the ones that look like nothing. Oh, I'm just going to go play for a local school, gymnasium. Well, hey, there might be some partner there, somebody who's going to say, we should do music together. And sometimes it's very difficult to make a mark as a musician, and very hard to make a living, especially in classical music. And sometimes it's these opportunities that come up that you never would have dreamed would make something happen. And on a plane trip, you could be sitting next to somebody. And, of course, don't neglect to promote yourself in a nice way. I mean, don't be obnoxious, but, say, well, I've done this, I've done that, I've got this recording if you're interested and so forth. But, just don't neglect the things that look like it's not going to lead to anything, because sometimes they're the ones that will really make it or break it for you.
Isn't that interesting? It's always
it really is. And I've seen many examples of that.
Yeah.
And to be open, of course, to doing things differently.
Yeah.
Sometimes somebody might say, oh, I don't really want to be an accompanist to a singer. Oh, I want to be a concert pianist. Well, yeah, but maybe that singer is much better known than you are. And people are going to hear you on the piano and say, hey, just a fabulous pianist. And, things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that. That's great advice. And no, I really appreciate that. I think that's always a great reminder of like, don't neglect the smaller.
What doesn't look important, right? Or a person even that doesn't look important.
Yeah, that's so true.
Nice,
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that. It's a really good reminder. Thank you again for your time. I really enjoyed.
It's been a pleasure. As I say, I am also like to communicate, so it's really nice.
Yeah, it is. And I'm so glad I got to talk to you. And I feel like, I enjoyed your story and your journey and your parents' legacy, hearing their amazing legacy and their story.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's, as I said, it's a little bit niche, you might say, but there's always interesting stories that you might not always think of.
Would you think there'll ever be maybe a movie, like a biopic?
That's we haven't really thought of that, because the problem is that they're no longer alive.
Yeah, maybe someone could play them.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah,
I'll bring that up. Who knows? Maybe somebody will like that idea.
Yeah, I really love those films.
And so you're thinking of that. Yeah.
I really love those those stories where with they're bringing they're doing a Aretha Franklin a biopic based off her soon, and just
really, that's cool.
And they did just like they did is it Bohemian Rhapsody and so many other countless of they did Bob Dylan movie.
Yes, oh my goodness, I still have yet to see it, but both my sons saw it and they love that movie.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, I want to see that. Really good. That's a good idea. Now you're putting me on a new legacy project.
Yeah, just let me know. Awesome.
Right.
Thank you so much again for your time. I appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. And always remember to live, love, laugh. We'll see you guys next time.
All right. See you. Au revoir.